To give a short overview of the work pack that we have been doing on the Ethiopian kind of geographical country context, and then the floor will be for our two actual presenters who will present some of the very interesting work that's been undertaken. So the work pack 3, we saw in the morning about the work pack 1, which was focused on the database. Then we have tomorrow about the financial flows and governance mechanisms that will be presented. But then the last but not least 3 work packs are more like or 4 on the country contexts. And in Ethiopia, we have a team of multidisciplinary scholars. We have Professor Bikila Warkineh, who is here with us today. Professor Ermias Lulekal on ethnobotany, who is not here with us today, all from Addis Ababa University. And then we have a PhD researcher, Tesfay Godifey, who will be presenting more about his research also just in a few minutes. So the empirical cases that we have focused on, I have put in the map the geographical locations. The uppest one is in the Tigray region that Tesfay will be talking about later, which looks at the ethnobotany and ecology in Endamekonni district in southern zone of Tigray. And then we have other more maybe social science influenced research cases, although these are overlapping, and some of the empirical cases are also overlapping and still finding their shape in the final kind of formulations of these research topics. At voluntary carbon markets of ecological restoration in the Wolaita zone, which is the southernmost star on the map. And we have looked at the invisibilization of labor conditions, of indecent labor conditions of landscape restoration labor in Oromia and Tigray regions. We have looked at restoration of water sources and the kind of abundances and scarcities that are produced within those hydrosocial relations. Then we have a little bit of different topic looking at forest coffee and the EU's deforestation regulation as a transnational regulatory regime. And this has been in the Bale zone, which is the kind of rightmost area of Ethiopia. And similarly, they're also looking at the more kind of situated ecological knowledges that are related to ecological restoration and trees and forests in general. And then we have one joint also methodological paper that we have just started working on about how to conduct research in times of violence and authoritarianism in the context of African geographies and more particularly in Ethiopia. So since the kind of case studies are quite broad in range, I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but here are just some kind of examples of research questions that we have looked into, for example, in the voluntary carbon markets. There, I hope so. So as we have heard about the kind of spectacular or kind of ways of how the carbon market virtual worlds are unfolding, we have one research coming up that looks at the ecological restoration spectacle and how it has this kind of material and performative effects on the representation and material transformation of socio-ecological landscapes in the global south. And then this other research question looking at the EUDR and squeezing the coffee out of Ethiopian forests. So basically focusing on the marginalization of agroforestry and semi-forest and forest coffee's production systems in Ethiopia. What kinds of tensions does the formulation of the EUDR entail with regard to forest coffee production, and how the different actors are responding to these tensions. Here we have so far, this was more to present for our financiers, but I think none of them are here today. So anyway, we have so far, we have one publication out, one policy brief with World Vision, Ethiopia, and then several conferences that we have been working on in the last, I think it's 2 years. But without further ado, I want to give the floor to the actual research content that Professor Bikila and Professor Tesfay have been working on. So I invite Tesfay. Okay, Tesfay will go first.
My name is Tesfay Godifey. I have served as lecturer, researcher, common service provider, and a leader in different positions at Raya University, which is one of the University of Tigray, Ethiopia. My PhD research focused on ecology, ethnobotany, ecological restoration, and nutritional analysis of some selected functional wild edible plants in Tigray, Ethiopia. Today, I'm going to present one of the objectives of my PhD work entitled Bridging Ecological Restoration with Human-Plant Interaction in southern zone of Tigray, Ethiopia. As we know, worldwide, forests regulate climate change, biodiversity, water cycle, and ensure human well-being. Even though forests provide these ecosystem services and functions, different factors like deforestation, climate change, agriculture, and urbanization, fire, mining, threaten forests. For example, worldwide, about 10.9 million hectares of forest are lost. In Africa, about 4 hectares. And in our case, in our country, Ethiopia, 92,000 hectares of forest are lost. As a statement of the problem, in Ethiopia, there is significant deforestation and forest degradation. Whereas, to meet these challenges, Ethiopia has committed national and international implementing key strategies like Green Legacy initiatives, climate resilient green economy, and participatory forest management exclosures. Even though there is successful experience in ecological restoration initiatives, there is gap on the integration of ecological restoration with human-plant interaction. In addition to this, there is also limited study related to this title. General objective: to analyze the mutual relationship between ecological restoration initiatives and human-forest interactions. These are the specific objectives. The first specific objective is to explain the patterns of human-forest interactions in the ecological restoration sites in the specific study site in Tigray. The second one is to assess the relationship between ecological restoration initiatives and human-forest interaction. The third one, to identify the causal mechanisms in which ecological restoration initiatives modify local communities' access to and reliance on and stewardship on forest resources. This is the map of the study area. The study area is located about 700 kilometers far from Addis Ababa, which is the capital city of Ethiopia. The study area is rich in biodiversity. The highest, the first and the second mountains in Tigray are located in this area. And the area consists of different vegetation types. And the area contains church forests and exclosures. And data were collected using both primary and secondary methods of using primary and secondary data sources. These are some of the photos I took during my field work, during focus group discussion, during reconnaissance survey, and during semi-structured interview. Actually, this is ongoing research. It is not finalized research. So I'm going to present the result of the ongoing research. So the said area, the local community used about 220 plants belonging to 176 and 76 genera and 73 families, plant families. So the area is rich in biodiversity. A graph that shows us the top 10 families. From these top 10 families, Astraceae contains the largest number of species, followed by the other two similar families, Lamiaceae and Fabaceae, followed by Ossi. When we see in our case in Ethiopia, there are about 243 families. From these 243 families, Astraceae, Fabaceae, and Ossi are placed under the top 10 families. In the case of categorical use of plants, the local community use plants for about 10 categories. And in the case of medicinal, the local community use about 100 plants for medicinal purpose. This means the local community has indigenous knowledge to treat both animal and human elements or diseases. And the area is rich for animal forage, including honeybee. So in the state area, there are about 53 plants which are used as a source of food for livestock. When we see the number of plants in the case of house utensils and toothbrush, there are a few plants used for this purpose. So there is variation among number of plants related to agricultural use. In the case of major source of plants, the local community uses more plants from the forest than from other land management types. For example, from agroforestry or from exclusions. So this means the local community is dependent on the forest, on the forest patches. I mean, Mr. Lane, but okay, I have. In the case of impact of restoration on access to forest resources, I tried to see the difference between the impact of ecological restoration on the categorical use of plants before and after. So there is variation. In some categorical use, there is a small shift, in other moderate shift, and there is high shift in the case of the impact of ecological restoration on the categorical use of plants. So in the case of medicinal, the ecological restoration does not produce a great pressure on the use of medicinal plants for the local community. Before grazing and after, before ecological restoration and after ecological restoration, the local community use plants from the forest. Similar with the toothbrush. But in the case of livestock grazing, fodder collection, cosmetics and beautification, there is moderate shift. Due to the presence of rulers and other activities, the local community is not directly dependent on these uses. Whereas in the case of charcoal and firewood collection, as well as agriculture and construction materials, there is high regulation. So before ecological restoration, the local community depends on forests for these categorical use, whereas after ecological restoration, due to the presence of rules and regulations and other activities, the local community doesn't get these resources from the forest or other land management types easily. Community stewardship and participation. In the case of the district, as well as in the country, the local community maintains the forest through monthly rotation system. And the second one is the local community ensures the forest by employing or by hiring guards. And in the ecological restoration activities, there is active participation of community members. Whereas when we see the percentage of participation between male and female, there is variation. Males were the primary participants. Whereas there are a lot of challenges to sustainable human-plant interaction. The first impact or the first challenge is the presence of war, and it has a direct impact on the forest coverage. And the second one is lack of restoration activities that match the local livelihood needs. Conclusion and recommendation. As conclusion, the conclusion can be modified. As I told you, it is not finalized result or it is not finalized research. Whereas for today, human-plant interaction at the district is not closely linked to the ecological restoration activities. The second one is ecological restoration initiatives are modified by ecological, social, and community participation that shape human-plant interaction. As a recommendation, policymakers or scholars should promote ecological restoration initiatives that match local community livelihood needs. I would like to acknowledge these persons and sectors. Especially, I would like to acknowledge Hanken School of Economics for funding my project and for inviting me to share this international experience. So I would like to say thank you. And my advisors, my department, and my home university, as well as my participants for this research. These are the list of references I have used for this manuscript or for this paper. Thank you.
I am from forest ecology. So my bias is more, my work has been on ecology. But in the case of restoration, if you see it as an equation, the local participation is half of the equation. Restoration will not be sustainable without the local people's participation. But I mean, that's obvious. And also the local knowledge. People have developed for centuries this knowledge passing from generation to generation. And so that is something to tap from. Mainly the scientific people doing some research, they may not give the weight for this local knowledge, which is really important and very important for the quick appraisal of the environment in which you have restoration activities. And I must say that restoration, we will come in the second part discussion, but it takes a long time. People think there is a quick fix. It takes a long time. And in the meantime, when you have area exclosure, you cannot say to the local people, you cannot use this exclosure for the next 30 years. So they need a short-term benefits. And that was one of the challenges we faced. So this is something to think about. And traditional ecological knowledge can be very important for species selection. Where do you have, and even determining the reference ecosystem. Usually when we have restoration, we should have reference ecosystem against which we say we have succeeded or not. So even for that selection, they have the historical memories, what used to be there, be it the flora or be it the fauna. So that is quite important. And also incorporating the local ecological knowledge is important for the social acceptability that we try to tap into that. And then how do you align the local, governmental, and international priorities? This is the regional or the national level may be different from what the local people want or the international. The local people want their income for today, while the national or international talks about the biodiversity, the climate change, and so on. So aligning these two is quite a challenge. And in this, you may have heard this forest landscape restoration principle that you should balance the ecological aspect with the livelihoods aspect. But in my experience, it's easier said than done because sometimes they could be contradictory. So how to find the right balance so that you meet both? So, but consulting the local people is really important. It's not enough just to have the ecological aspect. Yeah, and these
Maybe
are
one final comment.
one. Okay. But I have one, like you mentioned, there are like 92,000 hectares of forests, deforestation per year, understood. Now, the problem is people see it as just a number and they think plantation forests. I mean, this is a big question. Do we consider plantation, be it eucalyptus, acacia, or whatever, are they equivalent to a natural forest, which they are not? So the 92,000 hectares, it would be good to get the breakdown, how much percent is the natural forest and how much is the plantation. Okay, maybe I stop here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those great comments. We're gonna. All right, so thank you. And like I said, at the end of the session, we should have time to then have a more open, hopefully, if we do good. So I would like to invite Bikila as our next speaker, and I will get your presentation going here.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. My first time to be in Helsinki, Hanken School of Economics. Economics is quite far from what they do. That's why I said I'm supervising this PhD work. However, I started with biology and then went to ecology. I did most of my studies not very far from here, maybe a couple of, maybe 1,000 or so kilometers in Holland. I think a long time ago already, like maybe 12, 13 years ago. I finished my PhD in Holland 2014. Since then, I went back to Ethiopia and started to work in Addis Ababa University. So I'm not going to really present a specific research topic. Don't consider me also a researcher in the Trees for Development project. I'm just partner. I'm supporting the work. So my presentation may not exactly reflect the intent or the objectives of the project. So this is the Ethiopian Green Legacy Initiative. I think it's one of the biggest tree plantation initiative globally. And there's a lot of discussion about that. So the political, the socio-economic side of the Green Legacy Initiative, I think that will be for Linda to investigate. But for me as an ecologist, from the biodiversity perspective, from conservation science perspective, ecosystem services, and also trying to compare that to some global experiences. So I will just go through it. This is our Prime Minister Abiy with his son. This, I think, picture was taken back in 2019 when the Green Legacy Initiative, no, I think this is 2020, I think, 1 year after the initiative started. I think this is the National Palace. So the kid is very free to play and helping his father plant. Oh yeah, so I have two, which one should I touch? Here it's not moving. Oh, is it moving here? Okay.
It is.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So before JLite, what the biodiversity look like, and after JLite, some of the contributions that came about. So I'll try to be very brief about that, and then hopefully finish this in about 10 minutes. So yeah, Ethiopia is one of the mega diverse countries in the world. You can see the red areas. In Ethiopia, we belong to two biodiversity hotspots globally: the East African biodiversity hotspot and the Horn of Africa biodiversity hotspot. And I think with Madagascar also is the entire country hotspot. So you can see that these are global areas, important biodiversity areas, and Ethiopia is one of those countries. So it is a mega diverse country, top 25, I think 25-ish in terms of its biodiversity globally. This biodiversity has been actually affected, and the forest cover used to be historically reported. So there are variable figures here and there. However, some empirical research show, well, it was like back in 1900, it was like 40%. Now, near 2000, it plummeted to about 3%, or less than 3%. And this actually costed the country in terms of lost productivity and ecosystem services. So there is serious degradation in the country. These are known, global, well-documented reasons for degradation. I think in Ethiopia, the most important factors are related to the first two, and the fourth one, invasive alien species, is also nowadays becoming a serious challenge. For instance, in the Afar rangeland system, we are like 1.8 hectare of Ethiopian land is now covered with this invasive plant called Prosopis judicata, which came from, I think, northern Mexico or southern United States. So it's like invasive plants is also one of the issues. So this Green Legacy Initiative is part of Ethiopia's effort to avert this, to change this, and we used to have like 13% of the land, the land mass areas under the protected areas, conservation areas. We promised, the Kunming-Montreal 30 by 30 promise. So that as part of that, we promised to increase our conservation areas to 30%. I think this Green Legacy Initiative is supporting that. So initiated in 2019, it is a nationwide tree planting and landscape restoration campaign. The aim is to improve forest cover, combating land degradation, mitigation of climate change, HC and HC. So at the end of the day, I think the mission is to foster sustainable development, to support Ethiopia's sustainable development effort. So this is since the start of the Ethiopian Green Legacy Initiative, so it is mass mobilization. We planted, I myself, because I have seedling areas within my university, I have been working before the GLI. I myself contributed to over 5 million tree seedlings to the city government or the city administration in Addis Ababa for this effort. So this is a lot of social mobilization effort with a lot of tree plantation campaign. In terms of number, you can argue about the number, but I think at least the official report says we have planted over 47 billion trees and plus. And the estimated or the reported survival rate is 85%, which is disputed. I think 85% survival is quite high, but empirical research is, I think, one of the areas that's missing. But this initiative, regardless of the numbers, I think contribute to biodiversity, water regulation, carbon sequestration, it's so as part of, I think, the carbon market. And I think this initiative fit into the Ethiopian government policies. I think the first important policy is the Convention of Biological Diversity, which we ratified in 1994. I think the CPD came to effect in 1992. We ratified after 2 years, only 2 years. I think we are the first, I think, not the first, but among the first few countries who ratified the initiative. And since then, CBD also mandates the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. We started that in 2005. Now we're in the third phase, starting from 2025, the NBSAP or National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. That's an important document that I think the GLI is supporting. It also supports the Cartagena Protocol on Power Safety and the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing, and which is actually a proclamation also adopted as a proclamation in Ethiopia, the Montreal global biodiversity framework. I think I've mentioned that living in harmony with nature by 30 by 30, 30% of the land surface under the conservation area. So this Green Legacy Initiative, also the CBD, I think it touched a lot of all those green sustainable development goals. So coming to the GLI, in terms of biodiversity, it has achieved massive scale, mobilized millions of people, on average 30 million people mobilized every year, and directly contributing to those policy documents I mentioned. But most important, approximately Ethiopians work on nearly 15 million hectares of land. And this is quite enormous in terms of supporting this target of reaching 30% of our land surface area. So most importantly also, what people, because the numbers are usually argumentative, because this Green Legacy Initiative is not only planting forestry trees. So it's also planting of fruit trees, coffee shrubs, like coffee shrubs. These are planted as part of the economic plant, which is coffee is a very important commodity for Ethiopia. So I think the large percentage, over 55% of those numbers came from plantation of coffee, avocado, fruit trees, and including even banana. So sometimes, well, can I call banana a tree or not? That is in terms of technicality, but it adds up to that number. So in terms of, if you look at in terms of ecosystem service and disservices, the fruit yield increased. There are some empirical studies, reviews that we conducted. The regulating services, cultural services also included. And also in terms of enhancing genetic diversity, I think it is contributing in terms of endemic plant conservation and fragile ecosystem restoration. So I think I will go over this. I didn't get any notification for time, so I
Thought you were keeping your own?
I'm a teacher, so I can keep on talking.
I'd say
Yeah.
maybe like about 3 more minutes.
In terms of disturbance also, in terms of disturbance, I think one of the disadvantage from the GLI is related to plantation of monoculture, like for example, eucalyptus plantation in some areas, which is known to reduce diversity. In terms of competition for water, in dry areas and arid zones, you can't just plant trees, right? It means like pumping water out of the ground. So it's like in terms of water competition, and also in some areas there is opportunity cost for smallholders in terms of, for example, instead of spending their labor on crop production or livestock rearing, they have to spend their energy or labor on these activities. So I think in terms of ecosystem services, there is more or less net positive services, but there are also some issues that remain. And I think one of the recommendations that we try to give to the government or those people who manage the GLA is at least to have this 80% mix of indigenous vegetation or indigenous plant species when they go out for the plantation initiatives. And well, the tree plantation initiative also support the global initiatives, right? So if you look at the Bond Challenge or the China's Green for the Growth program and Ethiopia's own safety net program, also these are all really trying to mobilize tree plantation globally at global scale also. So if you compare the Green Legacy Initiative in terms of you can shout to me, okay? I can finish in 2 minutes. In terms of success, I think it helped, the report showed helped to increase the forest cover by some percentage to about 23%. It helped local regeneration and the survival. Of course, the caveat is that the survival rates, I think it needs some improvements. So the key lesson we learned is one is prioritization of native species. And also the need to focus on diversity over quantity. So I think diversity enhances more diversity, but when you focus on numbers, on quantity, then sometimes you can neglect the diversity. So in terms of strengths, I think massive scale mobilization is very, very important. But the caveats remain in terms of survival, in terms of exotics, in terms of limited monitoring capabilities. And there are also some inbuilt inequities in terms of benefit tend to skew toward the urban and less pastoralist areas, less toward the pastoralist areas. So I think there's a regional imbalance in general. There are some regions, for example, the Tigray region where my student came from is not actively really participating in this, even though in the past they were one of the active region in ecosystem restoration, but after this, it's not there. So we have some key recommendations that's there. So I think this is not important, but so I would say finally, green legacy is political and environmental mobilization, mass mobilization, but the long-term success I really depend on sites, appropriate designs, species selection, species diversity, post-planting care, which is really very little, and long-term monitoring and social safeguards. And I think Dr. Chetu raised the issue of forest landscape restoration practice. I think the GLI, we are recommending to the government to adopt that approach, because I think we believe that approach is more suited in terms of ecosystem restoration. And for 2030, I think embedding the Green Legacy Initiative within the NBSAP framework will, I think, help to make it secure. Institutionalization is important, and independent verification is missing now. I think that is some of the areas that needs. So I would say it is a bold national action, advancing CBD and the BSAP goals, delivering ecosystem service gains with caveats that I mentioned. And I believe if we embed that within the institutional framework of biodiversity, national biodiversity strategy and action plan, we can make it sustainable in the future. So thank you.
leave it there. And I'd like to invite your favorite couple of comments.
Thank you, Dr. Bikila and Tesfay as well for very interesting presentation. And this the GLI is really, it's inspiring and so on. But there are certain problems with it, which I will mention. Like in your the abstract and also you say like the survival rate is like 85%, which I very, very much doubt that it's that high, because we conducted in Garado, in Wollo, Amhara region, and it was even a Finnish government supported project, and we got the survival rate 49%, about half. And also in Oromia, some of the studies, they say like from 35 to 79%. So I have this question. I agree with your conclusion. Non-partisan body should really assess this. And I have, even in a published paper, they say that the reported survival is higher than what they found on the ground. So there is discrepancy. That's one. The second one is maybe for all of us, that is in general globally confusion between restoration and reforestation or afforestation. Reforestation and afforestation is not equivalent to restoration. It can be used one means. So people say when they plant trees, a monoculture, they say that that is restored, which I think is not true. In restoration, you're looking for the whole species composition, the ecosystem function, and also the services and so on. So it's much broader and holistic, this restoration. And the other, which I agree with your conclusion, I think you should go for native species. The non-native, I'm not saying it should be 100% no, but as much as possible, go with the natives. Like I was reading, like the planted species, there are many non-natives, like Acacia saligna, which comes from Australia, and it's an aggressive invader species. One should, Prosopis is the one you mentioned, so the advantages and disadvantages, as much as possible to go for the natives. And finally, which I think is very important, in my opinion, for the Ethiopian case, is to protect the remnant natural forests, not in parallel with restoration. So there should be conservation of these remnant forests. Like Tesfay mentioned, the church and monastery forests are one protected forest areas and so on. So that is, and I even go one more further. I don't know if you guys were aware of what was called the national forest priority areas in the end of 19.
It's still there. We have 57 of them.
Yeah, 58. Because I mean, people think restoration is quite easy. No, it's not. It's not when you want the whole. So it's better to start from this remnant, or also think in mind these remnant forests. And finally, just now I finish, like also, which I should have raised with you, this the land and tree tenure security. The government owns the land. Who benefits from these restored sites? And who pays for it? I mean, the community, it's a community land. So they are in a way paying for it. So this also has to be thought or yeah, which is security. Yeah, so these are some of the points. So I leave maybe the others.
Do I get 1 minute?
Yeah.
No? So I take all the comments. On the survival, I think I have briefly mentioned, it is disputed. The survival rate in Afar region is different from Jimma zone is different from Wellagga zone. So there's a lot of variabilities.
Yes.
So I take
Yeah. And yeah, okay, maybe.
yes.
Switching geographical contexts, we've had 2 presentations from the Ethiopian context, and now we are moving over to another one of our work packages, and work package leader, my colleague Ossi, will be introducing it, and then we will go into the presentation coming from that context. So Ossi, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's as the cases of these 3 African countries are very different in various aspects. Also the research done and the research kind of like structure and all that has been very different. It's yeah, we're having Ethiopian case, Linda has been living there, and Madagascar cases Market has been doing the research there for long, and me as well.
Keep going. You'll get someday.
I haven't been doing that much in Mozambique, so it's a big different kind of different situation. And we actually it's when we have these 2 projects, TreesForDev and REM, it's we have different partners within Mozambique for these, so it's a bit kind of cumbersome the whole way. Yeah.
Trees.
Yeah.
They're coming. Trees are coming.
Yeah, so for example, Natasha's presentation after this is not directly linked with the research made in TreesForDev project. So it's well, Natasha has been doing long time research on ecological restoration.
Did you get it?
Okay, yes. Good. So it's yeah, so I'm also from the Global Development Studies next string there still. Might be that was this the number of the work package? Was it 5 or 6? I don't know, but I thought it was 5. But then again, anyway. Therefore, the Mozambican partner for the TreesForDev has been this Observatorio do Meio Rural, OMR, and it has been, well, it's kind of a research NGO focusing on the rural areas. We even had the contact person was Mariam Abbas in the first, and then it changed to Senior George just in the mid project. We have been yeah, and then the REM project. I won't spell the whole name. It's long as well. So Natasha, Professor Natasha Ribeiro is our contact person for that, and the university. Okay, I have that little time. Okay. So just few words about what we're doing. We have me and Ville Gustafsson, who was doing his master's thesis, were there last year. There in mangroves, the student mobility within the REM project. There were 2 Mozambican students, master students, just this spring in the University of Helsinki. And then a bit not directly linked to the project, what my supervisors on was in Mozambique. About the fieldwork a bit that we did. So we had these 3 locations that we studied mangroves. We learned on this Nehemias from the last place was we made just to bridge the sensors to the map. So sometimes over that we like it. I won't go directly in that, but perhaps that gives you a little touch on that. We published the correspondence in Nature, Ecology and Evolution. With restoration. I organized the workshop on our researchers, activists in the society, civil servants. Vision and future for Mozambique. Yeah, and we will have the project on ecological restoration in Mozambique and as well as in Madagascar. And one of the coordinators will come here, but with flight problems like that he's not here. All right, but that was all. So now I think I didn't pass the time too much.
So my name is Natasha Ribeiro. I'm from the Warkineh University, where I teach restoration ecology. As Ossi mentioned, we are not the primary partners on the project, but we work together on the activities that he just mentioned. So today I'm going to be talking about my own research, not in mangroves, but in the Miombo woodlands, where I've been working for the last probably 30 years. So I'll do an overview of the restoration and the resiliency of the woodlands and some insights and recommendations for management and restoration. So just for those of you who are not familiar with the Miombo, so it's the largest dry forest ecosystem in Southern Africa with about 2 million square kilometers. So it's the green polygon there on the map. And it has a high diversity of plant species, so 8,500. Half of them are endemic. A part of that, the woodland itself provides habitat for a huge diversity of animal species, including migratory birds and mega herbivores. But also we call the Miombo a social ecosystem because it provides, and it's tightly related to local communities, providing over goods and services for over 70% of the population in the region. So talking about ecosystem services, this is just some pictures of the ecosystems from timber at the national level. So the economy at the national level, but also local and rural economies and livelihoods dependent on the Miombo land. So I think coming from a Mac to the Windows shifted a bit, but we always say that the Miombo, it's a safety net, especially under climate change, and during hard times, people rely on the Miombo to survive. So, and it's coming more and more with climate change. So restoring this ecosystem is really important. So some of the pictures, cool pictures of the Miombo on your right. So left side, it's the Niassa Special Reserve, where I've been conducting my research mostly. And then the other side, it's the Gila National Park, where I'm also conducting some research. So disturbances, we say that disturbances, they shape the structure and composition of the Miombo woodlands. And actually, disturbance is not a disruption in our ecosystems. Miombo is all about entropy, so fires, human activities, herbivory, also the climate is all together, they shape the Miombo woodlands. So because of this, and as you can see, 200,000 years when people arrived to the Miombo with fires, with all the activities related to the woodlands, we always say that the socio-ecology of the Miombo is very important, and we need to understand this before restoring or managing the Miombo woodlands. So talking about slash and burn agriculture, that is usually considered the main cause of forest degradation, we should understand that this came together with people 200,000 years ago. And instead of, by then, being a disturbance kind of activity, it was actually restoring diversity of Miombo. So across the succession, some species would come after the shifting cultivation. They wouldn't come if there wasn't a shifting cultivation. Of course, maintaining those fallow periods of 8 to 10 years, it's really difficult in the current context. So that's where the problem comes. People growing, human population growing, fallow periods reducing. So this all needs to be think carefully and then maybe improve. So this is a study that we are publishing and we conducted in northern Mozambique across a flora sequence. The graph that says adults shows it. So species diversity is lower in croplands, but also when you get to the fallows and the old growth forest, so you kind of see a recovery of the woodlands. And at the young stage, you don't quite see a difference in species diversity between the cropland and the fallows in the forest. So we say that Miombo is a resilient after shifting cultivation as long as the fallow periods are maintained. On another study, it's a PhD student in Sweden, is doing in central Mozambique, also studying the recovery after shifting cultivation. And this graph here shows the soil recovery. I should say that really we kind of see that it's a complex and very slow recovery of the soils. If you look at the nitrogen and the carbon, and actually the bulk density compaction of the soil increases after shifting cultivation in the fallows, although it decreases after 10 years, but never reach the old growth forest. And we saw, and we also addressed these after shifting cultivation, grazing and charcoal production and fires sometimes make it more of a complex kind of interactions. And we saw that these other activities after shifting cultivation are really doing this at the soil level. So a few years ago, we developed this, how we shift this shifting cultivation to a more permanent kind of agricultural system. So the graph here shows on the top line ecosystem services, and the blue column is the different agricultural systems. So the top is shifting cultivation, and the bottom is commercial agriculture, and in the middle is what we are advocating now, how we change this to a more small scale permanent agriculture. I want to go through the graphic, but some ecosystem services can be maybe sacrificed, like the agricultural yields, but then you gain in lower carbon emissions and other ecosystem services, including landscape intactness. So the fire paradox, I guess Amber talked about the fires and how some of these policies in the region are like very negative in terms of fire, so zero fire policy in Mozambique and most of the region. But we have to understand that fires have also arrived 200,000 years ago, and there's some species, including a first-class timber species in Miombo that depends on fires to germinate, and others are adapted also. And it is still the major management tool for these rural populations. So how can you have a zero fire policy when, like in Mozambique, 70% of the population is rural and dependent on fires for their daily lives? So keeping the fire regimes is one of the main issues, and we have been studying these shifts in fire regimes and how they affect the plants and the ecosystem in general. So this is we produced the severity map, fire severity map for the Gila National Park. So as you can see, most of the park is in between medium to high fire severity, so green to orange, and we saw some changes in species richness and fire tolerant species. But what we saw is that fire is important in species richness as long as you maintain. So in terms of recommendations for sustainable forest management, I think that we should change the practices as they are right now. Again, I don't have the time to go through the slide, but here we developed a model for Miombo since, for instance, after shifting when a fallow starts until stage 4, when we have a young stand. This is integrated forest management. From the beginning, you have products, forest products can be used, and it goes along the way. So you can get everything. In the graph, the bars show that the integrated forest management has potential to increase the revenue compared to the traditional. Biodiversity conservation is increasing in the region, the area of biodiversity conservation, but we think that there's a need to rethink the model of conservation, including, as the commentator said, how we capitalize the traditional ecological knowledge and make sure that this works in favor of biodiversity conservation, including the traditional practices that are important to support the ecology of Miombo. And then forest restoration. So we think that the Miombo, as I tried to show, it's really a resilient ecosystem. So there's a need to think about the landscape at the landscape level. How do you maintain the ecological corridors, but also shifting cultivation practices to make the landscape more sustainable. And of course, the REDD+, as we have been discussing here, it's not all about carbon, but also how you maintain also the biodiversity and the cultural values associated to these ecosystems. And with that, we want to avoid the carbon colonialism and protect the stewardship of our communities. And thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for really interesting presentation, and I like the fact that you mentioned disturbance are parts of the ecosystem. What is different at the moment is, or in many countries, is the intensity and frequency of the disturbance has increased so that the ecosystem can break down. That's one. And in general, when there is fire, we say that some ecosystems, they require fire. But even though they require fire, it shouldn't be over their capacity to sustain such kind of fires and so on. Okay, and then this is quite interesting, this Miombo, which is a dry forest. And dry forests are not given so much attention, although they have high endemism, although the number of the species richness is lower than moist forests, but they have high endemism. So quite interesting. And then there are certain features which from dry forests which can be used in the restoration, like copiecing, the vegetative regeneration. That is an advantage because most of the species have this capacity. And there are some technical like inoculation with mycorrhiza and so on and so on. So yeah, so these are quite important, and also the same, like I had these invasive species. There are also, I read from in Miombo, they plant some non-native species which are quite invasive. And also finally, which is a comment for all, not tree planting is not the solution in all cases. There could be, if it is an open grassland, the diversity is different. So it's better to maintain it as grassland than planting. Planting is not a solution for everything. Okay, that's all I have.
Well, thank you so much. Don't leave. Oh, no, don't leave. No, no. Because now we do have time. Thank you so much for our commentator. Thank you so much for our presentations. And now we have time to open it a little bit more to the floor. So if it's not too heavy, maybe we could have our presenters all come back down here and then we could do some questions for all. Does that sound good? Remember, we've had 3 wonderful presentations during this session. And so I'd like to invite, does anybody have questions, comments, or any of our presenters? Please identify which presenter. Sonia?
It's your presentation, but I think also maybe others. So we were discussing the survival rate. Is it standardized, like how long does a tree have to survive in order to be considered survived? And if it's not, then how much does it skew the results of this?
Should we go one by one?
Yes, please. I think that it would actually be really interesting to hear everybody's opinion on
Well,
this.
yeah, I think I was not really strong on the survivor. I stick to share report because if you look at my recommendation, I said independent verification is needed. So so far we have not really independently verified the survivors. And yeah, let me tell you briefly a story. Probably Dr. Chetu knows the coordinator of the GLI, Dr. Adefers, you know, Adefers. Okay. One good afternoon, he called me because, well, I am in Addis Ababa University and we are like considered the authorities. So he said, okay, we wanted to register this GLI on the, what's called this Guinness Book of the World?
Guinness.
Yes. And he said, yeah, I wanted you to help us technically on this and that. And then I went to his office and we tried to figure out, and then there is no standard. So if you don't have a standard on survival rate or even on the plantation, the methodologies of plantation, so sometimes you get stuck, right? You cannot really say. So that's why there is variabilities in region between site in terms of survival rate. And we don't have like independent verifiers. We have here and there some studies. Some studies, for example, in high forest areas, report 95% survival, whereas in other areas you get report of 35% survival. So there's huge variability. So we are still, we should work on that.
What about in your context, Natasha, what is survivability? How do you define it?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I mean, survival is survival. It survives or dies, right? But then I guess the most important is how, if it's a plantation, how it progresses over time in the growth rates and that. So from the Miombo perspective, the planting from seedling always as you mentioned, not always the best strategy. So managing stumps and coppicing, it's more important to increase the growth rates and the quality also of the restoration project.
And a few points. In my state area, I asked the world administrators regarding survival rate. They said, actually, as Dr. Bikila said, there is no standard to calculate survival rate, but based on the primary method of data collection, the field workers will go to the administrators, and both the field workers and the administrators will go to the field, and they count the plants, whether they are survival or not. If it is present in the planting area, the plant will consider as survival. But if it is absent, it is what? It is not considered as survival. So by counting this one, researchers are saying this percent of plants are survival and this percent of plants are not surviving. But there is no standard. In my study case, in my study area, this is the case.
Yeah, I think it's a pertinent question. For instance, my opinion is when anyone reports the survival rate, he or she should mention after how many years? 1 year, 2 years? Let me give you an example of Miombo from Zambia. The first year it was 69%, and the second year was 36%. So big difference. So my thinking is always mentioned. Is it first year, second year?
Maria has a.
Yes, I'm of course interested in the different initiatives that you now mentioned, where there is some intervention going on. How are they funded? And how are they, I think with the green legacy, we could hear that it's connected to how it's connected to the biodiversity, global frameworks, but what about like in general? And how is the green legacy funded? But also for the other.
Yeah, from the perspective of the Ethiopian government, the green legacy is nationally funded. So there is no actually global funding that's attached to the Green Legacy Initiative. It comes from like tree seedlings are usually prepared by what we call the district level government offices, and usually goes from Bureau of Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. So a little bit of funding comes from that government covers. So far, they are trying to get into the carbon financing and from the Global Environmental Facility. They are trying to get some funding from that. There are promises here and there. But for the GLI specifically, currently there is no really funding, external funding attached to it. So it's all funded government people. And what is, I don't know how you put it, however, the social mobilization, the free level is quite high. So if I go out to plant, I just plant. So it's like in a year, a week or 2 days or 3 days, people go out into forest to some areas to plant. Institutions also mobilize their own staff. For example, in Addis Ababa University, we have like 3 plantation day when we go out and plant and come back. So there's no really direct funding attached to them.
Yeah, in our case, there's probably 2 levels. At the more landscape level, we have, and we had, I think they will continue, big programs funded by the World Bank. Also, the GEF is also now with the fire management project coming to the country. But then at the local level, there's some NGOs like IUCN and others, WWF doing more like local, and there's also small NGOs working with specific community.
Are they connected to carbon markets?
And the carbon market is coming. Some NGOs are linked to that, but mainly the big ones are linked to the carbon.
And the World Bank, is it a loan? Do you know if it's a loan or is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
You have anything to add to that, Tesfay?
What about the, but it's the same.
Yeah.
It's much the same.
No, I know, but just to add, giving space. Yenny?
Thank you for your presentations. I have more detailed question to each of you. Actually, you answered already part of it, but so this way, I was interested in like when you talked about these church land conservation areas, like how are these lands or areas managed? Like what is the church responsibility? What is the state responsibility, and what are the responsibilities of the local communities? And then I was going to ask about the another Ethiopian case that how these people are mobilized, because you said that there are lots of people mobilized. So you partly answered to that, but if you want to kind of say something,
Sure.
you can add. And then to Natasha, you talked about like species diversity in this particular area, but I was wondering what kinds of groups of people live in here? Like in this area, are there any disputes, conflicts? Are people kind of like, do they agree on everything, or how are like relationships between people or within communities? Would you like to go first?
Okay, can I start? Okay, thank you for your nice question. In my state area, as well as in the whole country, there are a lot of church forests, about 35,000 church forests. And actually the number can be vary, but as I read from literature, there are a lot of church forests in Ethiopia. And from this, the first case is there is a strong relationship between the local people and the church related to spiritual value. The local community considered trees in the church forest act like ecology for human beings. And the second one is if you cut a tree from a church, it is considered as a curse. No one can cut any tree or any branch of tree from the church forests. So church forests are highly conserved by these methods. So there is plantation in the case of church forests, as well as the natural forests are conserved by this principle or by this case.
Okay. Yeah, well, just to add a little bit to the church forests, particularly the Ethiopian Orthodox Christians, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is quite popular in terms of having like church forests. So if you fly over Ethiopia during a daytime, especially the northern part of Ethiopia, you can see that vast land surface area has no vegetation. And all of a sudden you see spots of church in there, dotted all over the country with really nice and beautiful forest. It has to do with religion, but usually also the church areas are really protected because mostly they are monasteries where monks live, and monks also take care of plantation. They really take care of the forest, and people don't dare to go into church territory to chop down trees for any other purpose they may deem necessary, right? So the preservation is tied to religion and tied to culture. So it's a sort of sacred site. So you don't mess up with sacred sites, right? Back to the issue of mobilization. How is it mobilized? Yeah, it is. Should I say a little bit of Chinese style, right? Yeah, because it is an initiative of the government. So, for example, if us university, for instance, we ourselves, we have working days, right? From Monday to Friday. So suppose Monday is tree plantation day, we are paid our salaries, and the institution give us order to go, okay, we are going to have tree plantation day here and there, so transportation will be prepared. So we go to rural areas, and the local administrators, they do have really a say on what people do, right? So it is the mobilization is done through the government channels. So I think that's the short answer.
Yeah, thanks. Just to see if I understood your question. So if there's any conflicts in terms of natural resources management, yeah, okay. I think there's a hidden conflict there because from what you have just said, like you have protected areas, you completely exclude the local communities and they depend, some of them are sacred and they depend on those resources. From the point you do that, you completely break the cultural issue and the relationship with the resources. But, you know, local communities are always the weakest link in that, for instance, blamed for shifting cultivation is the main cause of deforestation. But what are the alternatives we give them to? So they say, okay, the project will come and the project will go. We do whatever you want us to do. But my point is that we need to really understand this ecological knowledge and their relationship with the resources to make our decisions. Otherwise, I don't think we'll fail.
We have our last question up top. Yes.
Thank you for this really interesting presentation. My question will be most because I am not really working on the topic, so maybe my question will be a bit naive, but I'm mostly working on the biodiversity and also on the ecosystem functioning. And it was my question, like, are you also considering the ecosystem functioning when you're like talking about restoration? Because I'm working also in one restoration project, and I am mostly on like how is the evolution of the disease, for example, in one ecosystem. If one ecosystem is being considered as alive, should it be like having more trees, or what is the mostly functioning matter that is going on? Which link to a question that I would like to ask to Amber also this morning, like how are you like choosing your study site? Because in some point there may be some kinds of a part of the study that can be combined with ours because you are working on the actual reforestation, restoration, or I don't know, and we are mostly working on the functioning of the ecosystem. So are you considered mostly the functioning of the ecosystem there, and how do you evaluate if yes, you are considering this other?
Thanks. That's a good question. I think when we talk about restoration, usually we talk about species, diversity and stuff, right? But yeah, I think it's important. And we've been also studying the functionality like shade, light tolerance, tolerant, shade intolerant species, the mycorrhiza, how the role in mobilizing resources for fixing, for instance, nitrogen fixing species. So there's some elements of functioning, and I think it's important. And even like when you talk about Miombo, the tree grass ratio is also important. It's part of it. Well, yeah, I think it's an important question for the restoration projects.
No, I think I would just compliment some of, for instance, myself, I do have a few other PhD students who really work with ecosystem structure, ecosystem function. Usually, those kinds of studies are not as easy as reporting survival of trees, this and that. If you want to look at ecosystem function, for instance, you really need a long-term or longitudinal studies. So you need a series of years to monitor, because especially when you start ecosystem restoration from highly degraded sites, then to bring back the complexity and the functionality of ecosystems requires time. And that time scale usually does not really fit into a single PhD or as a student. So those kinds of steps are hard to come by in our region, but we are starting. So.
A final word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I would like to have everybody give a big round of applause